Uh, People are furious that that the cost of living expenses has gone up exponentially, especially minimum wage workers, because as of now, they say that uh, they can't buy basic living expenses. They can't pay their rent. They can't buy food from the grocery store because the minimum wage is too low. And although I do agree with them, I don't agree with the fact that they want to raise the minimum wage, because although it is gonna help for a short period of time, but it's not gonna help for the rest of for the rest of the time. So eventually, it's gonna inflation is gonna happen, and we're gonna have to do this all uh, again and again. And I mean, just look back to 2008 when minimum wage was at $7.50. Now fast forward to 2020, its minimum wage is going to be at $15. So um, it's not only affecting minimum wage workers, but it's also affecting people that make a little bit more money than minimum wage. So if minimum like people like me, so if minimum wage goes up, that means that all the earned money that I've worked, because I started at minimum wage and I've worked my way up to what I'm getting paid right now. If minimum wage goes up, I'm gonna have to work even harder to go back to where I was before. So um, what we need to do is find out that minimum wage is not the way to raising minimum wage is not the way to go, and realizing that we need to regulate fiat money and regulate the cost of product goods. So for starters, inflation happens when there's too much cash flow or money in society. Therefore, having companies raise the product goods, and it's supply and demand. So people with more money tend to be good because they can afford the product goods. But people with minimum wage, since product goods went up, that means that they're still struggling. So we need to realize that raising minimum wage isn't really the way to go. It is gonna help for a short period of time, but it's not really gonna help in the long run. What I do think it is gonna um, work for in the long run is according to um, fiat money. What is going to work is fiat money. What fiat money is the production of paper money. So when the government produces paper money, and as we are right now, there's no regulations on fiat money, which means that the government produces a bunch of money, and it goes into society, creating inflation and creating prices to go up. So what we need to do is to put a stop to that, regulate the amount of money that they could produce in order for the supply, for the society to have enough money to make the goods not go up exponentially, but also not decline. So, and another point would be regulating other people, uh, regulating companies, and regulating, their pricing. So they work on a supply and demand system. So if there's a bunch of demand for it, then the the supply goes up. But I feel like the government should regulate how much interest they could put on the product, because if there's no regulation, then the product goes up for basic living expenses, especially in like for houses. Like the the rent goes up exponentially, and there people can't do anything about it. So that's why we need to um, regulate the at least like basic living expenses for people to not have to worry about so much uh, about living their life without um, having money for rent or having money for food. So overall, I wanted to say that although I do agree that the United States, as we stand right now, we do need to do something about uh, about our minimum wage workers, because it is. I've been a minimum wage worker, and it's hard to try to pay rent and try to pay for food. So although I do agree that having minimum wage doesn't really give you basic living expenses, but I don't agree in the fact that they need to raise minimum wage, because that's not only going to affect them negatively in the long run, it's also going to affect people like even me, who make a little bit above minimum wage. Or so what we need to do is need to realize that minimum wage, raising minimum wage is not the way to go. What is the way to go is to regulate the higher power, because they're the ones making the most money while we're the ones struggling. So out of all, I come to you and say, instead of raising minimum wage, to put a stop to these outrageous laws. Thank you.